Thank you all for coming. We picked a bit of a provocative theme for the meeting. We broke it, you bought it. That's because we wanted to get you guys to show up. But in reality, I think over the years, all of us in this industry have been building for the times. And certainly, as we all know, as we've been listening to the sessions today, times have changed. It was a different time for us. So it's time to change the way we manage supply chains. But change is hard. First thing you have to do about change is to have motivation. Well, we've heard about a lot of motivation. But the second thing about change is you've got to have a new way of working that will actually work. So today, TVN and I are going to talk about change, the evolution of technology, and how that may come about. But I wanted to start with a story. Back in March of 21, we probably all know this story, we remember it, there was a ship navigating the Suez Canal that was called the Ever Given. The Ever Given, as it was going through the canal, got caught in a massive windstorm. Before long, the bow of the ship was up against the eastern bank. If any of you have ever driven a boat, those of us who've been on a boat, you know if you snag the bow, the stern tends to keep going. Well, that's what happened to the Ever Given as well. And before long, the stern of the Ever Given was up against the western shore. And this is what happened. As supply chain professionals, we remember this. It was a chaotic time. We were probably all scrambling very quickly to say, was my shipment in front of this one, or was it behind this one? Is it going to make it out, or am I going to be stuck? How are they going to get this thing off those two banks? How long is it going to be there? How do I route my shipments around that? It was a very stressful time, of course. The monetary impact was unbelievable, estimated to be $9.6 billion a day. It's a staggering amount of money. And it went on for a long time while we were all trying to figure out, how do we reroute? How do we get enough shipping capacity? What routes do we take? How do we get, if we're going to end up at a different port, how do we get space at the port? So, very stressful time. The reality is that we worked really hard about that. And we had to have some canceled orders. We had to find new routes. The rates were changing. Capacity got consumed. But the one universal theme about all of that is we need to learn from this one. We need to learn from this one. We need to act differently. We need to operate differently. Well, the challenge we face is that, as we all know, those challenges just kept coming. Things kept happening. We had to act differently. It seems like that's all we're doing is learning. We're learning about how to do this. But over the last 5 years, many actions have been taken. Things have been operating a little bit differently. For instance, in some cases, we used nearshoring or reshoring for some of our manufacturing. Not all of it. I was asked on an interview in the middle of all that chaos, so all manufacturing is coming to the United States, right? How soon is that going to happen? Not going to happen. We did some of it, of course. We added some additional safety stock or buffer stock. That's one way to cover it. Manage some of the risk. We looked at diversification of the supply base, diversification around our shipping lanes, diversification in many different ways. But that's not optimal for the supply chain. Yes, it's good for risk mitigation. Yes, we could prevent the next time the canal got blocked or whatever the major event was. But it's not the best way necessarily to run the supply chain. But it's a necessary changes to make. The other thing we did was invest in technology. A lot of technology. There was a lot of investment being made over the last 5 years. A lot of people, a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money. It's estimated that somewhere around the neighborhood of $200 billion was invested in supply technology in the last decade. That's a lot of money. But what happened really was the number of systems that we use to manage the supply chain today proliferated. When I first saw this statistic, it was almost hard to imagine. 40 to 100 systems being used by a company to manage their supply chain. I said, I'm not sure that makes sense, until I started to think about even our company. The number of applications we use internal to our company is probably not too far off of that. So it's not unrealistic to think that that's the number of systems that are out there being used. Many of you may be facing that yourselves. But the challenge we face is that we continue to talk about the supply chain almost exactly the same way we did a decade ago. We still continue to debate about the accuracy of the data we have. How much inventory do we have? Where does it sit? What shipments were made? Who got delivered on time? Who didn't get delivered on time? Lots of debate. We really have the same conversations. And that's because most of the supply chains today are still running on cadence-based applications. Well, the next pandemic, the next incident that's out there, the next disruption, in fact, maybe it's happening right now while we're in this room. It doesn't wait for our cadence-based processes like a month-end S&OP process. If it's happening today, we got to deal with it today. Worst case, tomorrow. So a few years ago, we started on a journey. We started to think about the technology that's available today, the way the processes work, the pace at which these disruptions are coming, the challenges we have to deal with, and the fact that, in general, we're still operating on cadence-based processes. Could we make a difference? Could we think about it differently? Could we change the way we operate? Is there enough technology? Not only do we have the motivation, but do we have the process to change the way we work? So we went on this journey. And a couple of years into that journey, I was thinking about how we would operate differently, what technology we could build, how we could help people. And I ran across a particular company that had made a multi-million-dollar investment in a digital platform to basically give them a dashboard to see what's going on. And at first blush, that was an amazing configuration. This isn't exactly what they had, but it's representative of what we were talking about and visualizing and seeing from the investment they were making. It looked pretty cool. It looked like probably the best digital supply chain application in the planet. It had AI-based recognition technology. It had dashboards, tons of analytics. You could see every shipment that's moving on. But when we dug a little bit deeper and we started to talk about how they operate, the reality behind that investment was, yes, it was very helpful, but it really didn't change the way the company worked. They continued to really have, the back end of this was really still a manual process. So in essence, what they had built was a digital front door. You got access to a lot of information, great, it was helpful, it was insightful, but it didn't action things. So what would happen is if there was a delayed shipment, for instance, the person receiving that information would pick up the phone or send an email and talk to the shipper and say, what's the new estimated arrival time? If they were lucky enough to get an answer, then they would action it. How'd they action it? Pick up the phone, send some emails, fill out a spreadsheet, send the spreadsheet around. So the manual back end was still really in place. So great progress. I don't begrudge the fact that they made the investment. They're really happy with where they are, but it's time for a new journey. So what's next? Where do we go? How do we improve that? How do we move away from those basic technologies? The reality was that the system, even though it had the front end and it could recognize those events, it could provide information, the way the operation was still working is that the teams worked in silos. They weren't together, they weren't interacting together, they weren't even using all the same systems. Yes, they had the dashboard, but not everything was connected. The systems were disconnected. The information wasn't flowing seamlessly. And the planning operation, in essence, still was operating on a cadence-based horizons. So there was a lot of latency in the decision-making. They weren't able to act much faster. They knew about it much faster, but they weren't able to act much faster. And the challenge with most systems today is to make the changes you need to act faster is really complex and difficult. We need some intelligence behind those moves. If you make a decision or you want to go act on it, you need some intelligence behind that decision to action the decision you've just made. So where we sit today, in many cases, looks a little bit like this. It's a maze. We're still trying to navigate our way through it. We're trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to decide how to act in a better way. There is a lot of motivation for change. These disruptions are painful. They come faster. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of cost. And there's new technology that can enable the way we operate supply chains to operate differently. So I'm going to let TVN continue the story.
All right. Thanks, Allan. Hopefully that maze looks familiar. Does it? Right, we've been living it. So it looks familiar. Again, great thing about us humans is that we figured it out. We always do, don't we? We got it out. How long did it take? Anybody remember? 6 days, 152 hours to get Evergreen back on and go. They used tugboats, excavators, ton of people, very strategic deployment of the tidal waves. Kind of use a lot of different things to get it out in 6 days. Obviously, everybody knows about it. It's a massive disruption. Very dramatic. In our businesses, everywhere else, it's not always the stuff that ends up in newspaper. It's the stuff that happens every single day. Right? The disruptions are happening whether because of the reasons inside your business, inside your industry, and of course, geopolitical landscape that's continued to evolve. Everyone's looking, when you wake up, you look for the news. What changed? Right? So that happens continuously. So how do you adopt? Right? What can we do to change the future? Okay,
not working.
All right, let's see. Okay. How many times have you heard AI so far? I think so. So you're probably going to hear like 1,000 times before you leave this conference, right? Well, it's not new. I mean, it was like 30 years ago. I had friends in college working on neural networks. So it's been in the works for a long time. Is it there? No. But it can change the world. It's the best technology innovation that happened over the last 100 years since Industrial Revolution. Probably the foundation for what's going to happen in the next 100 years. There's no doubt. When it will be ready, when it could be autonomous, when it could help you solve the problems you're facing today is to be determined. But the technology is real, and we all need to lean in. Ignoring it or dismissing it and really wait and see, it's really not an option. Right? Hopefully that you hear that all the time. A day doesn't go by without hearing AI, whether it be on newspaper, on your company, or board meetings, whatever, right? It's a continuous topic. So what we, right, Aptean and Logility, deploy AI to solve very specific problems we'll talk about in a minute. So let's step back and talk about software. Over the last 50 years, obviously, software has taken over the world. Right? It's the number one thing that's drove automation and human productivity over the last 50 years. Do you guys agree? Right? We all come to work, we carry laptops around. Right? That was not something we're supposed to do, but right? A lot of the software drives everything else in the business today. We expected, from a software perspective, all the vendors that buy software expected something like that. Software works in harmony, works together really well, gives you insights, visibility into your business, so that you can make decisions and act on the outcomes. Did it happen? Does it work that way? We all wish, right? But instead, what you got? Something like that. Or maybe I missed the spreadsheets too. On top of that, there are probably a bunch of spreadsheets flying around, right? It's probably not exactly like that, but it's probably pretty close. Right? You got a ton of systems that are connected, not connected, data flying around, data everywhere. You can't Now, 4 people look at the same data, they come up to what? 4 different decisions, right? How often you sit in a room with number of people looking at the same data? One person has a Power BI dashboard, one has Excel, one has looking at this and making different decisions. How do you operate in a system that's like that? Also, software over the last, call it 50 years, is the only, it's the only one you actually pay maintenance to fix the defects. It's the only industry that charges you actually have to be on support and maintenance to get it right. Right? So it is, we obviously, significantly, if you're still using a lot of on-prem software, you know what I mean. However, supply chain is a continuous flow. It's moving very quickly. The disruptions are happening nonstop. On average, I think there are about 30+ disruptions happen to a company's supply chain in any given year. How do we make sure we're handling these before they happen? Right, today, we let alone proactively handling them, we barely know until they blow up. Right, the damage is, Allan talked about specifically that incident, but the damage is because of supply chain disruptions are real. Right, a lot of your businesses are dealing with it day in, day out. Right, so how do we really get beyond what we had in the past and move forward, leveraging the technology in front of us to go to the next level? So you're expecting software vendors to give you solutions, identify problems, if not proactively, at least reactively. When it happens, just tell me, I'm going to go fix it. Instead, what you got this. Every software vendor over the last 50 years, because of whatever constraints we had on this product development side, whatnot, give a piece of the puzzle. And then it falls on the customers, right, your enterprises, to figure out how to fit these pieces together. Some of you may be in IT, you understand what I mean, like number of systems, you got to move the data around and put dashboards and connectors and boomies and all these things to move data and build data warehouses, all of this stuff to make sense of the data and then try to predict what's happening across multiple systems. One of the big things that drove why was software, if you step back and think about it, why was software development so hard? Even though it's the #1 value creator in terms of the automation in the industry by far, right, till date. It was hard because software development was hard. Number of software developers in the world are still very small percentage of the global population. Yet, planet runs with software. Right? Typical product release, if you even have been involved in software, right, you kind of know, like 12 to 18 months, sometimes, and large teams are involved in it. And development costs range from millions to billions. I mean, there's no way. It is significant cost involved in it. That's the constraint. By the way, that's 18 months to probably get the first release out, if you know, right, what I mean? But to get it right, it takes a lot more span, a lot more months, fix the defects and service packs and all of that stuff you hear nonstop from us. We're getting to a breaking point. Right? The supply chain doesn't stop, right? Number of disruptions are changing. It's a continuous things happening in supply and demand side, right? Driven by internal and external geopolitical landscape changes, right? And the pricing changes, all of that stuff. These disruptions are nonstop, right? It's not going to change. So what's going to help is, I know you don't want to hear about it, but AI, right? AI will definitely help with a lot of these things. While it's not deterministic, it's still probabilistic, it's going to still make significant difference in everything we do, not only in supply chain, everything in our life. #1 is, I'm sure you all read the news about how much code is developed by AI. Actually, right now, I came from engineering background. I wrote, started my career writing code. And we don't act, right? Today, I wouldn't be starting computer software, right? Because machines can write code. I just need to ask and tell them what to write. That's a big change from, right, today, where you need massive amount of developers to write code. Right? That's just by itself changes everything about software development. Right? Last 50 years, software changed the world because of the code, and now machines can write code. And it's evolving every single hour very, very rapidly. So that's massive impact on everything we do. And it can actually identify and solve problems, right? You can predict, you can put all the data sets together, which we cannot do personally, and put all together and predict. Will be 100% right? Will it be deterministic? No. It'll provide within the guardrails, it'll actually provide a lot more visibility than we've ever had. Last thing we will talk about is hyper-personalization. It's going to be, because of the amount of the compute power, amount of the data it can analyze, it can actually solve problems, narrow it down. The solutions for a broad the solution down to your company problems. Our goal is to move from what happened to what's coming. Historically, we've been working on like a reactive mode, trying to figure out what happened. And then now we move forward into how we can change the future in terms of figuring out solutions based on business impact. Impact on your business with all the external factors and internal factors, whether it be raw materials, issues your business may have, or industry changes that happen, or some other pricing changes or geopolitical changes that happen. All of those come together to help you predict and react to what happened. And driving autonomous intelligent actions. The intelligent ecosystem that's sensing the changes that's happening continuously and working together with everything else happening around your business, going deeper into your business, and also maybe even to competitive landscape. Everything together can drive intelligent actions. Again, obviously, every single company is going to be a different place on how you let the machines, let the AI go act on them, or you want to supervise, make sure that you want to approve those actions or modify the actions. That's going to be up to a business to decide when they feel comfortable about it, depending on the use cases. But it's really going to be, you'll be designed to have executed autonomous intelligent actions upon approval in the workflow. More importantly, one of the things I'm looking forward to with AI is hyper-personalization. People can only go so far with understanding the data, which is like multidimensional, right, about me, about my company, about my supply chain. AI, one of the best benefits of AI is going to be hyper-personalization. It will go deeper into your data, right? And you put the context of your data on everything else. Every workflow you have, the custom workflows, every major business customizes workflows. Every business is different than the next one, right? There's going to be things you want to do differently than other business. You cannot, like, while, as a software vendor, allowed to say, hey, everybody should use my software out of the box. That's not, right? There's going to be some customization, personalization that need to happen for your business, and AI will actually help with it. Versus the SaaS software we hear about, just use it out of the box if you want, right? With that, the solution for what we talk about, we call it as decision-centric enterprise.
So let's tie it back to the supply chain. A decision-centric supply chain, and what does that really mean? How do we operate? I'll use 2 stories to tell about how this ties back together again. So the first one, let's just talk this through for a few minutes. Let's say you've got a major customer, a lot of business, a lot of volume. You've got a on-time and full objective, 95%. That's what we have to deliver to them. And then one day we get a call from the CEO who says, it's not making it. It's not cutting it. We're running about 90% most of the time. You guys got to fix this, and you got to fix it quick. So, wow, what do we do? How do we deal with that? Well, in most cases, we go into firefighting mode. We roll a team together, we gather up a bunch of data. Where does that data come from? 5, 6, 7 different systems. Where do we put it? We put it in the spreadsheet. Of course, that's the tool for figuring everything out these days. We put it in the spreadsheet, we gather the team. What do we do then? We argue about whether the data is accurate or not, where it came from, who's at fault, who caused this problem, how are we going to get out of this mess? And hopefully, in a little while, you figure out what are we going to do, because we're going to save this customer. We need that business. We're going to get our performance back up to the 95% level that we committed to. But it's a lot of work. You're going to be in firefighting mode for days or weeks, and you're going to be on edge throughout that whole time period. So again, back to what I said earlier on, let's think about it a different way. In a decision-centric enterprise, the system will be monitoring your performance to all of your customers, or at least most of them anyway, all the important ones, however you want to set that up. It'll be looking for your performance objectives. If you start to trend off a little bit, it'll deliver a report back to your team, to you and your team. You can interact with that system. We heard a little bit on that, the stage on that earlier today. But the important part of the process that will really just close the loop now is to change the way we work. And the way we work today is that the system, leveraging AI technology that TVN was talking about, will automatically run some scenarios. And it will schedule and deliver a report to you with a set of scenarios in it. Here are the possible ways we can address the fact that we're trending off. We're not down to 90% yet, hopefully, but the way we're trending off. Here are the actions you could take. There may be 3 or 4 examples of those. It'll give you a scenario of each one of those, a summary of each one of those scenarios. What does that mean I'm going to do? What are the potential ramifications? What are the positives? What are the minuses? And even more important today, what we can deliver to you is a recommendation on which scenario you should pick and why you should pick that one. After a little bit of discussion, on the same screen where you're looking at those scenarios and understanding the problem, you can action the changes in your operation in order to make that happen. So within the same framework, the AI system will then intelligently go make the changes to execute that process, keeping us on track. The hardest part in most systems today is being able to know and be able to act on the changes you want to invoke. That's the tough part. That's what's changed in our world. That's what AI has brought to the table, is the ability to automatically, intelligently implement the change and make things happen. So let's go back to the Suez Canal. We'll revisit this topic. Let's say this happens again. You're enabled through a decision-centric enterprise, and you're sitting there wondering what's going to happen next. Maybe I'm in this room together. Again, the system could be monitoring external events, identify some problems that may exist in the supply chain, possible disruption, quickly do an analysis, come back and tell you how many shipments are at risk. Again, it will do some scenarios, come back with some recommended possibilities that you could act on, give you a summary of each one, pros and cons, give you a recommendation and why it picked option number 2, 3, 4, or 5, whichever one that is, or a variety of actions you may take, and again, initiate that action. In theory, you'll be making the changes in your supply chain before most of your competition even knows the event happened. Pretty powerful change in the way we operate a supply chain. We can do it today, all of it? Heck no. Are we on that journey? Absolutely. Are we executing actions in some steps of that today? Absolutely. So, going all the way back to where we were before, we got lots of motivation, a lot of disruptions, a lot of costs, a lot of challenges, a lot of stress, and we now have the technology to enable us to operate in a different way. We no longer have to be subjected just to the cadence-based systems. Let's act when the events are occurring. Let's move forward. So it's a whole different world that we're living in. Speed to react is critical in this mission. So we're there. So we'll wrap up our session. TVN, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think our world's going to look like
with AI? I think it's going to be radically different. We're going to have a couple of fun predictions here. One is, how many of you agree with me the screens will go away? You don't need to carry those laptops around for work. Yeah? They will go away. They will force it on us. Right? At least for work, you don't need to. I'm sure you need the big screens to watch football or Super Bowl. You don't have the wall-sized screens, but not for work, right? Well, okay, those are not natural to us. They were forced on us, so they will go away. I don't know the timeline, but eventually they'll go away. Right? We may need little variables here that pop this, and the screen comes in front, and then you just do it, and then it goes back up. They don't need to carry those laptops. I hate carrying mine. All right. So the second one. Here, I mean, you know this, you read this all the time. If you think about today's organization structure, it was the foundation of that was scientific management principle. Some of you may have heard it by Frederick Taylor back in 1895. Whole philosophy was that about, humans are cogs in the machine, the manager tells people what to do, and they go do it. Obviously, evolved a little bit with knowledge workers and computers and software, but fundamentally, it's still a version of organization principle, of scientific management, that's for 130 years ago that drove industrial revolution. Those constraints are gone, right? AI can do a lot of different things versus people learning one skill and be really good at it. So our organization structures, maybe you know of today, will radically change. We don't know what it's going to be. They will radically change. All the big businesses try to become small businesses. Lastly, now machines can write code. Software is free, barrier to entry. You don't need developers to write software anymore. You have an idea, feed to cloud AI. We'll give you a product. Well, one of the examples we did is like it took $9 to build a product, 21st screens. Right? So that's happening now. So what's going to happen is I'm looking for this email coming from AI telling me that I can have my supply chain software $99 per month. All I can eat. Right? All I can eat, so do everything, it's going to reduce my supply chain cost by $1 billion if I pay $99 per month. Buy a company with 2 employees. That will happen, right? But however, that's the AI. Generative AI is about 74% right. Are you going to get into a Waymo car? It's going to tell you there's 74% probability that you're going to make it to the other side. No. Right, that's the issue. When we talk about AI a lot, it is only about 74% highly probable. However, what's going to make it work? This is why we are here, is AI plus industry expertise. Industry expertise, centuries of industry expertise, like companies Logility and Aptean has, the people that have spent centuries helping customers in different things, understand problems within food and beverage, and a candy making company is different than like furniture company, which is different than, right, like the simple distributor distributing stuff, right, across the nations. They're very different problems. While they may look same to AI, they're not same problems. AI will have answer for everything. When you combine that with the rich data and the rich knowledge built into the industry's focus on specific products, the workflows are customizable for specific companies, then you can actually get it to be useful to do what Allan said, to make decisions which help narrow the scenarios down to a few that can be executed and approved by someone to execute on it. So that's what we think. The future, the industry expertise is going to put the guardrails around the AI, as you know of, to make it useful and predict your supply chains, and then avoid the problems as we talk about necessary dimension.
All right, well, we used all the time today. We'll be here for a few more minutes. We're happy to talk to you guys about this very interesting area. It's really exciting for us. I've been in this industry for over 30 years now. I'm nearer to the end of my career than I am the beginning, but this is probably the most exciting time we've ever seen. So we'll be here for a few more minutes before the next session starts. For the rest of the week, we'll be here. Come see us at booth 42. Would love to hear your thoughts on this and see if we can debate a little bit about how this might impact our industry. It's a fun place to be right now. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you all.